welcome to another podcast or webinar, which is Clinials Insights, People First Fireside Chat. And this conversation is really exploring the human stories around what we do, the philosophies and practices behind our two companies, and our commitment to really rehumanizing clinical trials. And I guess that's what we're going to dive into today, and what it means to be human-centered on all of the hype, and stories behind, we started our companies and the role of humans in clinical trials. So I think that's a place for us to start, to do some intros. I'll let you start, Keith, and why your company exists.
Okay, why it exists. It's a long story, but I'll keep it short. I've worked in clinical research for over 20 years. Started out actually as a bench scientist before that, and so as academic research. I've always been a scientist, I think, even from a young age. I lost my best friend when I was 11 to sickle cell. And, I couldn't quite swear why. He had a twin sister. She was okay. She survived. And just that, I still hold on to that image of the funeral, Sylvester passing. And look, I think I was always geared to go down this route in some way or another. I come from a family of doctors. I've always found science interesting. And fast forward 20 plus, 30 plus years, and I'm really quite focused on patient engagement, having been involved in cooperations, the commercial side of the business, and I chair one of the national ethics committees here in the UK. So it was that initial spark that got me into research, shall we say, and then it was a personal, potentially acute health that made me really focus my mind and divert off and purely focus on engagement and retention. I saw the system was broken, no fault of anyone in particular. It's just, it is what it is.
Well, we have a lot of synergies in that way, and as well, and then we could start chatting about some of those things. So my name is Maree Bear, and I'm CEO of Clinials, and our company exists, Clinials, to solve that problem of accessibility and communication of clinical trials. And we're essentially using technology to speed up and save time for researchers and patients by using AI to generate trial documents in minutes. Now, my personal story is there's two pathways. First of all, I'm a technologist, and I've always been a technologist. But what happened was my husband went on a clinical trial. So this is my second digital health company. My first company was a personal health record for people to track their health. But when my husband went on a clinical trial, it just made it very clear to me how difficult it was to understand the complexities of a clinical trial. So, receiving protocols and sitting at the table going, what do you think? How do we make sense of this, and should we go on this trial? So, and then I saw he was reporting adverse events on a piece of paper, and it just certainly opened my eyes to clinical trials. Before that, I didn't even know there was this thing called clinical trials. So that was over 3 years ago. And I just thought, wow, what an awesome thing these clinical trials are, and what if more people knew about them and they could take advantage of new treatments sooner. And really just hooked me in, and saw all the issues, but I thought, wow, if we could, if people could actually understand what clinical trials were about, if we could communicate that in a more succinct way and a more practical and plain way, because I certainly couldn't understand the big words in the protocol. Maybe we could change, people's minds on clinical trials. So that's what set me off 3 years ago. Now, I was possibly always meant to be in this pathway because I grew up with a aunt who was a genetic scientist, And I grew up having, conversations around ethics. She invented connecting a microscope to a TV, time, and she worked with the friends and chromosomes. So, there's always conversations around that growing up. So, I feel like, the planets aligned for me. I was, having those conversations growing up and then throwing those ethical conversations into what we're doing now. Really, I feel like the loops have been joined. Yeah.
I think the industry we're in, you come here with the reason or for a reason and with the mission. There are a lot of easier ways to earn a living. There are a lot easier jobs out there, and I think that's something that either we lose sight of, people don't quite understand at times. A tough environment. We're working in an environment where failure is the norm. And I don't mean that in a negative way. A number of drugs do not make it through very early testing. So it's not the norm that you succeed and you complete a project and that drug makes it through. So you have to have a lot of resilience. You have to really love, in my opinion, what you're doing. That's why I think a lot of the people that I've met over the years, and in particular in the last year, just listening to their stories and why they're here. It's, in your case, your husband came onto a clinical trial. The people, they've a child or sibling that has been impacted by a particular condition, and they didn't see an opportunity of hope. And that's what, for me, clinical trials offer. It's not silver bullet, but it does provide a different pathway for patients to potentially find a pathway to health. That's how I look at this.
Yeah, and hope is everything. Yes, that's what comes into, everything we do. As you say, sort of inbuilt into the way that we have to be passionate, we have to be mission driven, and those stories that brought us here are really are what keep us here. And even though, as you say, it's very difficult, we don't have that coming from the heart, driven, to be able to keep going. And because the industry is full of burnout, the industry is full of, failure, as you say, you have to have these missions to be able to keep going. Probably that's the next topic we're going to talk about is this tricky one, which is called human centricity. And what does human-centered really mean? And both of our perspectives, what does that mean? How do we bring that into what we bring to the table? What do you think, Keith?
I have no concerns with the term human-centered, even patient-centric, if it is used properly by the definition that it was actually intended. For me, I think we throw around terms, or we develop these buzzwords or buzz terms, and we're far too liberal with the use of the words, not really thinking what it means or not necessarily seeing it through. So for me, human-centered or really centered, for me, that should be a standard by which we are looking at the person involved in the process, whatever that process happens to be, and ensuring that the process works for that person. Doesn't put them under undue stress and impact their life in a way that makes it more challenging, where we actually, whether this is a technology product like you've produced or we produce now at PRX Engage, or whether this is a clinical trial, it's about having that engagement with people who will be users of a system, a clinical trial, whatever it happens to be from the beginning. It's, for me, it's really creating a space where people can bring their whole selves to it. Otherwise, you end up burning out, as you said a minute ago. Really, it's about bringing empathy and trust.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the space we're in. I think there is confusion around, patient-centric and then human-centered, because there's some parts of what we do that are meant to be, patient-centric, but there's other parts of our processes that we're working with, which are actually really should be human-centered, because it's the, yes, we ultimately, the trial is about getting data and having patients going on clinical trials. But if we don't think about all of the, follow the bouncy ball, all of the people that are involved in the process, and then, what are we designing for? We're designing for, in the way that I think about it, and it's a communication problem rather than accessibility problem in some ways. If we're designing the way that our systems work, they're designing it for their, the way they think and also their bandwidth. And I don't think that's always the case. We've got, the process side of things, we've got, people in research teams that are juggling, 20 different trials and 20 different, and what are they thinking? Are all of the stakeholders along that supply chain, or their managers or whatever, thinking about, that juggling is going on and the impacts of the trial, and how that might also impact the delivery of the trial to the patient as well. So I think there's also process, and how that is that human-centered or not, and all of those things. So, I've got two sides. I think about, centered in the processes of people in the research teams, and then also, there's also the human-centered way that we should think about, patient communication. Are we actually communicating to patients in a way that will, engage them in the trial? Are we creating documents that are for the patients instead of for compliance?
I think we're doing a bit of both, but I think one of the biggest challenges is and this is something that kind of comes across from what you're saying. It's the patients. I am a patient. These are not two distinct groups of people. We are all humans. We all have different ways of expressing ourselves, different ways of taking in information. And, I think there's sometimes, it feels very siloed still. And I think that's one of the challenges. And that's where we have an issue with communication, is one group is doing one component and others doing another. As you said, are we ticking boxes from a regulatory perspective to make sure that we don't get in trouble? And again, another human nature. No one wants to be told off. So I think if we strip away it's a them versus us, this works for both sides, because even patients take that view of, well, actually biopharma is just full of human beings, again, who are typically moving into this mission driven, who want to help someone that they know, or something that has impacted their life, or they have a real passion for this industry. And it is not a patient is a different being. We are all patients, and I think that's one of the biggest barriers, is removing this centricity. So I like the use of human-centered or people-centered, because actually it's a collective, patient or not.
Yeah, exactly. And because you never know when you're going to move from being a human to being a patient, if you like.
You're still a human when you're, and I think, so Maree, that's one thing. You're still a human when you're a patient, but it almost feels like we dehumanize this sometimes, and just to label a box. Yeah,
exactly. And I guess, if we're forgetting, to treat, people like humans in the way we're, I guess, siloing, what does that matter to the delivery of the clinical trial? No matter how good the drug, if the protocol is misunderstood, the trial will fail. So how do you think that human-centered aspect, what can we do about that as far as the work that you do?
I think it's about PitRex Engage. We look at how we better engage people wherever they are, but using behavioral science and really self-determination theory to do so. So looking at awareness, competency, and relatedness. So we use a dating app analogy to explain the way in which we work. That's not to trivialize the work we do or the significance of being involved in a trial, but dating apps are part of everyday life. People understand what they're there for. In some cases, it is just a fleeting romance, an exciting time, and for others, it is I'm hoping for many others, it's a lifelong commitment, and it's a forever engagement. And that's what a clinical trial can be, especially when you look at the newer therapies coming onto market, the gene editing drugs. These are lifelong engagements, marriages. You can't divorce your own genes that have been edited without a lot of work. But so for me, it's how you engage with various groups in a way that identifies what the benefits are for each other. It's clear that we are actually genuinely in this together, that our overall mission is aligned, albeit our own personal targets and hopes and goals may be slightly different. And there's nothing wrong with just explaining your expectations to others, and that's to others. That's what we do. This is what a clinical trial involves. We do this in a very plain language. I don't want to say simple because that's not fair on populations, but simple language. Can I actually understand what someone is asking me to do? What is the benefit to me? What is it they're getting from it? I spoke to someone a while ago, and they taught me the term conditional altruism. But this is in essence what it is. I will do something for you, but this is what I'm expecting to get from it, and vice versa. So, it's about using language in a simplified manner. We're in a society where people very rarely read, let alone write a letter, or are willing to sit down and read a book or a 40-page document. And that's what patient information sheets are these days. 40-page documents, of which a third or more is filled with text that is to cover the bases, language that has been somewhat simplified from the protocol, but still can be confusing to people. One patient information sheet can't serve everyone, but it has to serve the many. So what we try and do is using AI, which is something that I think more and more these days use, using AI to make it simpler for people to understand their position and really what they want to do, which is their awareness and their competency piece. And then we try and make it relatable to their day-to-day life.
Yeah. And I do think that's exactly, we're on the same page as far as that's concerned, that plain language, that communication. I mean, that is exactly why I started the company, because I could see that I certainly couldn't understand the complex words. So how could anyone? And I'd also like to bring this back to that. Why is it that we're, in general, the industry is not very good at this? And what I discovered was that, I guess, if we look at, say, researchers, biotechs, medium-sized biotechs, they're awesome at science, but not necessarily translating the science into something that's more understandable in many ways. So I think that's where experts such as yourself and now technology as well can help with those teams that are not sure how to create those simplified summaries of trials for patients, or for the teams in that way as well. Because what I've noticed is that in many research teams, there's we now have people on the teams that are, say, project managers or marketing people, and they are very good at the skill set that they bring to the table, but they're not always having a background of science or research. And so for them, how do they understand they need to communicate to the patients? They're actually in the same boat as I was 3 or 4 years ago with trying to go through a call. And so that is exactly we have inbuilt into AI to be able to in a couple of minutes generate those plain language summaries, generate patient information sheets. And they can really help those research teams that don't have those abilities, or they're really just overburdened and stressed out.
I think tools like yours are the reason, or one of the reasons we met, is I came across you, how you were communicating, what you were doing. I looked at your platform and I thought, this is really interesting. For Look, again, your platform, mine, they're not silver bullets. They're not going to now solve every single problem. But what they do is they close a gap, in my opinion, where a number of pieces may not necessarily be there. We work in an environment where there is a lot of churn in terms of staffing, people moving from company to company, new people coming in all the time. And I think having tools that assist you in your learning, assist you in your ability to do your job, and close that gap from a communication perspective, that's huge. I use AI a lot in terms of how I'm trying to communicate a problem across. And where I use it personally is sit and talk to ChatGPT or Gemini. You know, I'll have a full conversation with them. Sometimes you almost forget that there's this human, just to reason out a problem or to work through something. They're great tools for that. You still need your human guardrails because, you know, as good as AI has become, and I'm sure it will become even better, it can't mimic properly human empathy, and it can't mimic human emotion in the way that we do. You know, things that rile me wouldn't rile a computer. I've never had ChatGPT tell me that they're leaving, quitting, and storming out the office. I've certainly had that in the past from people. So for me, I think they're really good tools because it gives the ability for people to bring people to a level playing field and also transfer knowledge, give people a good starting point to then take it on to that next step. Very similar to the way that the trial landscape works. We move from phase to phase, leapfrogging until that drug is ready for the market and for patients. Yeah,
and that's exactly it. I mean, obviously, I'm excited about AI because I can see, you know, it can really facilitate, in our case, the communication really easily. But I, you know, in every day, I mean, I use AI all day long to get me to a starting point. And I think that's I guess what we're talking about here is using AI in a safe way, you know, keeping the human in the loop, because, you know, we want to consider, well, we're working in a regulated space, so, you know, what does that mean? That means that we are working we need to work within guardrails. We need to consider how we can be cautious, but how we can be efficient.
But I mean, as a human, if you take one of the regulations that's out there, even the most brilliant mind can't remember every single component of a regulation, whereas AI can at least give you the black and white version and help you understand, are you deviating off track, keep you on track in that regard. So look, there are a number of people still who are not necessarily embracing AI in the way that I think we all will do. You know, 5-10 years from now, it will be not even 5-10 years, 2-3 years from now, you're not going to walk into an office environment or into a work environment and not use AI. It'd be the same as walking into office environment and you haven't taken your laptop in, you've just taken a notepad and pen for the day. I mean, how effective are you going to be? Not particularly.
Yeah. I had a meeting with someone today, and they said, you know, even in a year's time, the landscape is going to look different, you know, because of AI and how, you know, processes are going to be. I mean, what do you see the risks of being, especially, you know, human or an ethical lens?
So for me, I think it's, and I do see this in the ethics meetings that I chair. There is a use of AI where information has been produced clearly from AI. Again, I don't mind as long as it has been curated, shall we say, by the human eye. Where I've seen researchers walk in and not quite know what's in the application, they've just relied on AI to write it out because they see that particular component of the application as just something that they have to do. And so when questioned on these things, the minute you scratch the surface, there isn't that much depth. So I think it should not be a tool to replace a task. There will be some tasks that actually should be fully replaced by AI. So this is not about taking away jobs, but there are some tasks that AI will do better than any human. AI doesn't forget when you have to do something, humans do. And so using that as in that capacity is one point. Explaining information in some ways can be done better by AI 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where humans actually need a break. And it also means that as a human, you can then focus on the components of a process, the empathy, the just being there for someone that you would not necessarily have had the time to do if you had to do all the components. So AI has a real important job to play in what we do, as long as we use it ethically, we maintain those human guardrails to do so, and we do not see this as a substitute for doing the work ourselves.
Yeah, and it's about not having it in a black box. So it's having the human in the loop, having the guardrails. I had a thought about the empathy, and I think it's about having empathy involved in the type of content that you are communicating, because I mean, there is some empathy that's missing in some of the content that gets produced now. You know, there is some empathy missing in some of the data points that get asked in protocols, and the expectations of people, some clinical trials, what they're expected. You know, if it's to come in and do blood draw for children, you know, days in a row, and it's like this. So I think there's an approach that we can take, actually using plain language and also an empathetic way that we can say, review a protocol, review the inclusions and the exclusions, and look at the way that we're generating questions and asking questions and what the data points are. So I think we can have that as part of, you know, it's embedded into the process, but also not have it as black box, and then always have the human in the loop. What do you think?
Well, the human in the loop provides the empathy. AI can mimic empathy. It can help write in an emotive tone, which is fantastic. It can help distill information into plain language. It can translate information better than I've seen a number of translators I've used in the past, and obviously much quicker. So you can communicate that information across to a more diverse audience. But true empathy comes in that human engagement, and the point is the tools that we have should take you to a point that allows that human engagement, where trust is being built along the way, and that trust is then cemented by that human engagement.
Yeah.
This way we all stay busy and we all stay in jobs. So I think people shouldn't worry about losing their job to AI. If you're good at what you do, there'll always be a place for you. Your job is just likely to change.
Exactly, become an expert, actually, more, you know, less mundane and more expert. Now, I think we're coming to the end of our conversation, I think, and we've got a final, some thought here. If you could change just one thing about how this industry treats people, patients, sites, or teams, what would it be?
I think there's a lot.
So many.
Look, I clearly work in a space that looks at helping patients better engage in clinical trials. So if I could do, and this is a genuine, not some corporate speak, because there is no corporate, it's me and a small team of people. Left a very good position to do this. If I could do one thing, it'd be that anyone who is interested in being involved in a clinical trial, in whatever capacity, but in particular, obviously patients in my regard, walks away feeling that, like, at the very least they know more, at the very least they've had the opportunity to look at different pathways, not feel overwhelmed, and most significantly, not feel like they've been dismissed. Really, they've been given an opportunity. So I would love everyone that wants to take part in the clinical trial to have that opportunity. I know that that's not realistic, but at the very least, we can give people the respect and the ability to walk away knowing I know more, and this is what I'm going to do with that information.
Actually, we sounds like we're once again on the same track, because what I feel is that clear and respectful communication is the least understood, and it's underrated innovation in space, the need for it. And yes, this is why I've created Clinials, is that I'm looking to change that we can prioritize the way we can communicate at all, in all parts of the process, make it easier to communicate and have it more of a priority rather than an afterthought. It's definitely an afterthought now, and I want to make it number one.
Yeah, I think the key word is trust. It's building trust.
Yeah.
And real trust. Yeah. And also acknowledging that we have negated that or made various groups very untrusting of what we do, and acknowledging why we've done that and or why that's happened to start to rebuild that trust. I think that's key to building in a far more diverse population that actually wants to engage in what we do, in research, in bringing new therapies to market.
Absolutely. And trust is like empathy. Trust is is really inbuilt into communication. If you don't have people trusting what they're reading, what they're understanding, this breaks down. It reflects in, people leaving their jobs. It reflects in patients dropping out of studies. So, well, look, this has been such a lovely conversation about humans, and thanks for the conversation, Keith.
No, thank you very much. Always good to speak to you. Look forward to many more.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.